So next we'll be introducing Nicole Marinick from Marin Marcoux Marketing. Nicole credits her success to a hard work ethic, her natural curiosity, and flexible approach. Clients, associates, and students benefit from her deep understanding of international food supply chains and expertise marketing well-loved consumer brands. As the managing director of Marin Marcoux, her team provides expertise to launch startups, elevate well-established companies, and support government and nonprofit organizations to achieve more and to thrive. So join me in welcoming Nicole to the stage.
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. And hello, I actually have never met you in person, but I know we worked together many years ago. Actually, I don't even remember. Okay, so we'll get started. If you like, please feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect. I'd be happy to meet you there. So some of the clients that we've supported are just sort of listed here, so you can kind of get an idea of some of the people we've worked with recently. And my background really is I worked with a lot of well-loved sort of entertainment brands in the past. So that's where I got my start in branding. That's where I kind of really learned about sort of marketing communications, understanding the consumer market and how to position yourself. And all of those strategies really still apply to any market that you're in. So for the last 18 years, I've worked in food and agriculture. And I got my start because I started working at the George Morris Center, which was sort of affiliated with the University of Guelph. And for about 7 or 8 years there, I worked on business development projects through the supply chain, as well as consumer research. And I think that's one of the things that sets our agency aside, or sets our agency apart from some other just marketing agencies who have a good understanding about how to take a pretty picture of food. We really understand the food supply chain, and we're really well connected through the different chains. And other people that work on my team also have a background in catering, cookbook authors, or nutrition. So we're all sort of really deep into food. Okay. So by the end of our quick time together today, I hope I'll have answered these questions. And of course, I welcome questions. If there's something that's really pressing and you'd like to just put your hand up, we can do that. But I think we need to use the microphone for the people who are online. So it might be better if we wait till the end. So if you maybe could just make a note of it, and we'll get to it at the end then, I guess. Okay. So when we think about marketing with influencers or partnering with influencers, I think what we have to sort of realize and take a step back is that working with influencers is one tactic of your marketing plan. So as a marketing professional, you need to think about what strategy, what's your plan? What are you trying to do? What are your goals? And that would help you determine then if working with influencers is perhaps a consideration you need to think about. It might not be a fit for you this year, right? Could I have a show of hands? Who actually works in marketing? Are you all marketing people? Okay, great. Has anybody actually worked with influencers before? Okay, great. So these are sort of the different strategies. If you've taken a marketing degree at all, you know about the 7 Ps or the 4 Ps. And so I would say that influencer partnerships typically fall into promotion or communications, but it also is a little bit of the people part, which is who is part of your team. They might not be something that, they're not on your staff, but they still represent you when you partner with them. So it's something to be mindful of. So when we think about planning, we look at all these are some tactics that you might need to consider when you're looking at your overall marketing plan, right? So there's owned, earned, paid, shared. And a partnership can fall into any of these different areas. And so when I talk later about, the deliverables and cost, that comes into it. What are you asking them to do in terms of the different expectations? A lot of the time, I think people automatically think of like Instagram posts, and that's an influencer partnership, but really the range is far greater than that. So in my career, when I started thinking about this presentation, I mean, again, I work with influencers pretty much every day. It's a really big part of our job. And Instagram is a big platform for us. TikTok is a newer platform that's an up-and-comer that we've been working with more and more. And YouTube as well is one that we've worked on quite a lot. Facebook, not so much anymore. Twitter, not at all. Snapchat, we haven't with the brands that we're working on, and Twitch, we haven't worked with any brands on that platform either. But there's a greater history of working with influencers that a lot of people don't think about. And in the good old days of marketing before social media, we always worked with influencers too, but there were a different type of influencer. There were journalists, people who had qualifications. Necessarily, sometimes people you would somebody like Michelle with a degree in like a dietitian degree who you'd put on television. Nowadays, almost anybody with a camera can have a community and a voice. So when I talk again in a minute about who you want to decide to partner with, these are all different things to consider, right? There still is a place for traditional media, TV, broadcast news, print, newspapers, magazines, but certainly the market has consolidated considerably in Canada as pretty much everywhere else in the world. And digital is kind of where your audience is at. So when you're thinking about spending marketing dollars, my go-to with every program, and something I ask myself many times a day, just to kind of keep myself on track, is who am I speaking to and why do they care? So you're not going to change, with the budgets that we have, we're not necessarily going to change behavior. We're not going to suddenly make people start watching TV again, right? So you want to talk to people where they're at. And most people are on some kind of social media every day. And so that's why partnerships on social media have become so much more important in terms of marketing planning, because it makes sense financially to connect with people where they're already authentically spending time. And so when you think about what platform you want to target or what platforms, you would think about who am I speaking to and why do they care? Where are they? So if your audience, this is a pet peeve of mine actually, a lot of people I hear them say, oh, Facebook is dead. We don't want to be on Facebook. We don't care about Facebook. But depending on what your market is, Facebook can be a really useful and important platform. And just because younger people aren't on Facebook doesn't mean it's not important anymore. So you have to always think about what makes sense for my company and my brand and our marketing plan, what we're trying to achieve. Again, LinkedIn might be a really important platform for you, right? So I'm going to focus more on digital because that is typically where a lot of people can create some significant gains, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It's also a place where I think brands can directly reach out very easily. So in the past, because there was like a limited number of influencers, say with media, agencies had a sort of stronger negotiating position to try to make more money because they were almost the gatekeepers and had these ongoing relationships with media people. It's actually quite hard to reach out to a journalist if you never really had done it before. Whereas now, if you like somebody on Instagram, you can send them a DM, right? The gates are open. So it's how do you decide who to work with and how do you manage that relationship to make sure that it supports your marketing objectives. So the thing that I think you have to think about is I've already said you need to think about your overall marketing strategy and your plan. What resources do you have in-house to support the work that you want to do? But you have to think about what's your brand stand for? Who are you? Right? Because that will determine who you partner with. So I just picked Red Bull because it's one that a lot of us probably we understand that product, but maybe it's not necessarily our product. But we can see here that on their website they've got like extreme sports, but they also have this like paper plane world championship that they're sponsoring, and that sort of speaks to the tone of their brand, right? They're sort of for people who are like high functioning, kind of adrenaline seeking, but also their commercials tend to be a bit silly. If you remember those like little cartoon characters where Red Bull gives you wings, they're always a bit silly, right? So they weren't too serious. And that's, I think, where that paper plane partnership comes in. So their brand, it makes sense for them to partner with people like this, right? So what does your brand say? What are your key pillars? What's your tone? Is your tone serious? Are you a voice of authority? Are you approachable? Are you sort of like, the neighbor next door? Those are sort of things you need to be really mindful of before you start an influencer program or influencer outreach to make sure that you're partnering with the right people. So you need to understand your marketing plan, what your goals are, and also where your brand is, what you sort of represent. Because the thing about branding is that it's sort of, you have to be very, very consistent or you can damage it very easily. So you don't ever want a negative surprise. You always want things to be consistent. So, for example, like if you think about Apple and the computers, right? You know what the packaging looks like. It's very clean and sort of functional. The stores in the retail environment are also clean and sort of minimalist, right? There's at every aspect of their marketing planning process, those 7 Ps that I mentioned at the very beginning, they're all sort of reinforcing a tone and voice and the key pillars that you expect from them. So Apple's platform, there might be sort of like think different. That's kind of their thing. They don't want to be like everybody else. We're an individual. So if you remember their very, very first launch, maybe you're too young, they were trying to step away from the PC. And they were saying the PC was this old guy and they were like this young, cool guy and he wore jeans and the PC guy wore a suit, right? We're an individual and we don't conform. We're a bit different. We're authentic. And if you still look at their website, their new product launches for their watches and the newest phone that comes out, they're like the things that you see on their website will be phrases like you've never seen anything like this before, right? It's the same actual messaging that they came out with in the 80s. It's the same thing because the brand messages never change. So when you're thinking about who you partner with, you have to really be mindful of kind of what your brand voice is and that they will be an authentic fit for you. The other thing about branding, and I think today, which is really important, is that nobody really wants anything that's too perfect, and nor do we expect it. Everybody wants authenticity, and they like to see transparency. So I say that because when you're talking about who you partner with, you don't have to necessarily always be perfect. It could be a little bit like something new for you. So say, for example, if your goal for your campaign is to launch a new product, maybe it is a new market opportunity and it's a little bit outside of your what you regularly do, right? So if you're partnering with new people to reflect that new market opportunity, as long as the tone and the brand is the same, it's okay, right? It doesn't always have to be exactly the same. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. The thing about authenticity, though, is that it still has to feel real because when it doesn't, people will call you out on it immediately. And the internet is very quick and can be incredibly harsh. So I just wanted to show this one because this is one of my favorite examples of terrible marketing. I don't know if I just click it, if it will work. Oh, no. If it doesn't work, we can still move on. I can tell you about it. Okay, you know what this is? So this is one of the Kardashian sisters, and this is a commercial that she did with Pepsi a few years ago. But the commercial is quite long, and we wouldn't have watched it all. But the idea is that she's doing a modeling shoot, and there's all these artists doing creative things. And outside of all of these artist studios in this building, there's a protest going on. And there's a line of police officers standing at the end of this protest, and the people are getting more and more rowdy and angry. And this Kardashian sister comes out and she goes to the front of the line and she offers one of the police officers a Pepsi, and everyone's friends again, right? And I mean, the whole thing's cringe. It just like from the music in it just makes you cringe. Everything about it makes you cringe. It's just awful. And so when I'm saying like, you know, who are you speaking to and why do they care? You have to think about sort of what feels real, because if it doesn't feel real, then no one's going to connect with it, right? So when you're thinking about who you're partnering with, look at them and say, you know, are they the type of influencer? And this is not always a bad thing, but are they the type of influencer who every single post they put out is sponsored and they're a gun for hire and they'll put their name to anything? Right? Or are they someone who genuinely fits and kind of authentically believes in what you're doing? And therefore, when they speak to their community about you, it will feel real and be more meaningful. So here, when you think about, again, you know, who you're partnering with, you have to think about, okay, so where's my market? Are they the Instagram market? Are they Facebook? Are they Pinterest? Is it TikTok, right? And then you would do your research or due diligence to say, and again, like with our agency, we're in it every single day because we have to be. So we have a big roster of people that we work with quite regularly. And then we're always looking for new people too, because there's always up and comers, right? So you have to sort of say, what is it that I am hoping to get out of this relationship? And then you think, before you go spending your time wasting reaching out to a bunch of people to see if they're interested in working with you, create a brief, right? What platform is most important to us? What resources do we have internally? Are we on Facebook and Instagram? If we partner with, like the amount of times I've worked with some farm brands and they want to partner with people only on Instagram, but they're not on Instagram, right? So in a way, it's a bit of a disconnect because that person's going to tag you, what with, I guess, a hashtag, but they can't tag you on Instagram because you're not there, right? So you sort of think about what resources do you have internally and what's the best way to make that campaign work hard. I think another consideration about when you're thinking about who to partner with, it's what skill set do they have that you need? So thinking about the deliverable, sometimes, say for food brands, a lot of the time we're asked, can they create a recipe for us? And we also want to have a nice picture, and now we'd like to have a nice video to go with it as well. So do they have the skill set to create the recipe that actually is going to taste good and feature your product as a hero? Do they have, when you look at their feed, does it have a similar aesthetic to what will support your branding? And if it doesn't, that's okay, because it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect for your feed as long as you think it's going to fulfill the objectives of your program, right? So if you're trying to speak to them and their community, you need it to look good for their feed, not for your feed. Their feed, not for your feed, right? And then maybe if it's totally a misfit for your feed, you'd share it on a story instead of putting it on your feed, because it just is going to look really out of place on your feed. Do they have the time to do it? A lot of people work well in advance. They don't necessarily have the time. Some people only are influencers part-time. They have other jobs or families or other commitments, right? So do they have the time for your project to actually commit to it and deliver? The amount of programs, I would guarantee in every program, at least one person reschedules their post pretty much every single time because something comes up, right? And sometimes there are some people I've worked with many times, and I know to plan for their thing that comes up because they're very reliably unreliable. But the work is good enough that is good. I'll still work with them, but I know that I have to give them a false deadline. So, again, think about your timelines for your project. How strict are they, right? If you're working really last minute, you're going to be paying more than if you can plan further in advance. And are there conflicts? Did they support, your competitor recently? If you're developing a program with a lot of different influencers, as a group, will they work? Or is there some kind of maybe conflict between them? Sometimes it can be like one person who's super political, or maybe on their feed, they campaign for something very hard. That's a personal passion project. Maybe it kind of doesn't have anything to do with you, but if you're asking people to come to an event together, it's going to be a bit awkward if it's a small, cozy event and those two people are going to clash, right? So there's lots of different considerations to think about. Another thing I would really urge you to consider looking for and asking for is, where is their community based? So a lot of times people will say, oh, I want influencers that are really, really big, 100,000 plus, 200,000 plus on Instagram. I want their followers to be really, really big. And then when we do a deep dive and figure out where their influencers are, a lot of them are in Russia or India, and that's actually not the market we want to speak to, right? So just because you have a big audience doesn't mean it's an audience that you care about, right? So don't pay for things that are meaningless. Take the time to ask. And anybody who is, genuinely professional will provide that information to you. The other thing too is, like, what's their community like? How engaged are they? So sometimes you can say they've got a massive following, but maybe that following is kind of a bunch of bots and nobody comments, right? Everybody that I work with has slightly different requirements for what success looks like. And so you'll need to decide for your group, your team, who you report to, what does success look like? A lot of times in marketing nowadays, we say that the number of followers or community size is like a vanity metric. It doesn't really matter anymore, that engagement is more important. But I'll tell you that a lot of people on boards don't care. They still want a big number, right? So trying to create maybe a balanced approach so that you appease those people who want a big number, but you know that you're still doing good work and you've got some people who have really amazing engagement. Also sort of say, for example, because I work in food, we work with like a lot of plant-based things. Sometimes there are some angry vegans out there, for example, right? Like, be mindful of the type of person who's commenting on the person that you're partnering with, because if they've got a bunch of people who are really kind of negative in a way, there's a greater chance that maybe your project could go sideways. I have to give you an example actually that's just come up this week. So with anything that's like a, I guess like a recipe from another culture, you have to be really mindful about how you recognize and acknowledge that. And so somebody said that their recipe was Viet inspired. And that person that was doing it for us was from an Asian background. And to be honest, when I typically as a PR person, I thought something inspired is relatively safe. You wouldn't say it's a Viet recipe if it isn't. And also if you're not from Vietnam or your background isn't from Vietnam, probably it's better to say Viet inspired than Vietnamese, because you're just inviting negative feedback if you aren't sort of careful with your word selection basically and acknowledgement. And so typically if something kind of is Viet inspired, I would say that seems pretty safe. But we did actually somebody post something for us and she started getting some haters. There were only a couple, but they were like spamming the thing, not Viet recipe, like just spamming it. And I'm like, you know what, we don't need it. So we called her and said, okay, this is not going so well. What would you like to do? Because I think that the relationship with the people we work with is actually a big part of the work that we do. So we're not just telling them, we want you to create a recipe and it has to look like this, and we want you to say these things, which I have seen brands do, and I bet you have too, where you read it and it reads like an ad, doesn't feel authentic. The work that we do never is that. We always try to partner with people who it's a genuine fit, and we think the work they're going to do is going to create something meaningful for that community. Sometimes things go sideways. So like this week, it was going a bit sideways, and I wasn't going to just dictate to her what to do on her feed. There are different ways to mitigate an issue, but you have to agree together when it's on someone else's platform. She manages it, it's her name on there. I'm not going to tell her exactly what to do. I can strongly encourage something, but ultimately it is hers. So, I said, these are what I see as the options. What would you like to do? And so she said, I'd like to take it down. Because you can't change on Instagram the visual, you can only change the copy. And so she's like, I'd like to take the whole thing down and redo it. And I said, well, if that's the case, we need to, when we repost it, we need to put in some kind of acknowledgement that we made a mistake before or misjudged or whatever, and to rectify it. So I'm actually in the process of doing that right now. We're getting a client involved to make sure that they're aware of it. I actually really, hand on heart, don't think we did anything wrong on this occasion. But still, it was just kind of going in a way that we didn't like. So we worked with the influencer to try to figure out what's the best thing to do. And she'll probably post it again in a week or two with the correction and an acknowledgement to sort of, I guess, appease the people who were angry and upset. Sometimes things do go wrong, but it's how do you manage them together to try to make it right. And in terms of partnerships too, I think this comes into the cost really, but are you doing a one-off with one person? Or are you building a program, an ambassador program? Is it something that you're doing like many posts over a year, maybe even 2 years? Or is it like they're going to do some stuff on social, they're going to come out to your building and do a tour, right? Are there lots of different elements to it? Do you expect them to go on TV? So what are you expecting them to do? Is it just one post, or is it a whole plethora of different things that you're asking them to do? Okay, so that's also like, do they have the skill set for all of those things? So that comes into, you can see now, it's like when you're building a program, it's sort of like how long is a piece of string, right? There's a lot of different considerations. When you're working with different influencers, you have to sort of say, what is it you'd like to have and what do you need to have? Because sometimes most of the people in agriculture can't have everything they want. We don't have the budget for it. So we have to be creative and say, what will get us to where we need to be? The other thing to consider is if they have an agent or not. I always find people who have agents are a lot more expensive than people who work independently and negotiate for themselves. So pretty much, I've got to say, actually, as soon as people have an agent, I almost don't work with them anymore. And it's not because I have a problem with agencies, but we usually they're costed out of our budget. We can't afford them anymore. And also I find that the work costs me more to manage because it's not a direct relationship anymore. So we can't negotiate with them to share a vision or to brainstorm. It's always done through the agency. And then I feel like the work is actually often less creative and less meaningful. But that's not to say an agency can't be great. I mean, we're an agency, right? So I think if you get the right people, it's okay. And this is just something else to think about here. So there's lots of different levels of influencers. Typically, the ones who are smaller have really better engagement. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? They have more time to engage with that smaller community. Oftentimes it's a niche community. And so you have to say with your marketing plan, what is it you're looking for? Is it impressions and reach or engagement? And if it's a balance of both, maybe if you're looking at a program, you'd have some people who are quite large and you'd have some new up and comers or people who have a stronger relationship with the people in their community, right? And just as the thing about Instagram. So Instagram is a big pain in the bum for anybody who has to work in it every single day. I don't know if you agree. It's like, everyone who works in it is like, just drives us crazy. And that's because, you know, things keep changing. There's always something new. You think you're doing something right. It's almost like if you've had a newborn and you think you've got it right. And then the next week, everything changes. It's kind of like that with Instagram. Instagram's like a newborn baby. That's so since 2019, you know, this engagement has dropped across the board. So there was a done by, I can't remember who did this one. There's all sorts of different free information you can look at online. So if you just do some research, like Pew has some really great stuff. Later is a scheduler. They provide free information. There's lots of different, if you want to do research, you can do it yourself too. We're always doing it because we have to stay up to date, and I'm not going to pay for all the research if it's for free and it's available, so go get it. But you know, this is interesting because it's showing that across every sector, Instagram engagement is down. And for the food industry, average engagement was considered to be 1.5%. So that means out of like the people that you touched with that post, only 1.5% of them commented, shared, or liked it. In Canada, typically too, you'll see there are fewer comments than with an American audience. I sort of reconcile that with that's just our culture. So American athletes who come to Canada, they're always like, wow, you guys are really quiet. You don't cheer as loud as Americans, right? We're like that on social media too. We don't comment as much as Americans. It's just the way we are. So anyway, when you are looking for engagement, a lot of the time too, you know, people say, oh, I want to have the same engagement as last year. Well, if you want the same, it's going to probably cost you more because we're going to have to spend more time to get the same thing. So we get engagement by engaging. Right? It's a relationship. So you don't just post and leave it. You have to engage. I think that's probably it. I'm sure all of you are asking, so how much does it cost? Yes. So it depends who you work with. I've worked with some people who do really lovely work, but don't have a massive community. And sometimes their work can be as little as sort of $250. The most I was asked for one post with a picture only was $10,000. And their community was about 65,000. Like that for me was ridiculously expensive. And I actually laughed. I was like, wow, you can get that, good for you, but that's not going to come from me. So yeah, it depends, I guess. You know, I think there's a lot of people who work sometimes for $10,000 still, and they'll do a lot of different things. There's some people who I've created programs for, say, $3,000 with a number of different influencers. But part of the reason why we can get those deals is because even though you as a brand aren't working with them as often, I work with them a lot. So they'll give us a better deal. And the relationship is as such that they know the brief they're going to get from us is clear. They can achieve it really quick, right? Readily without having too much back and forth. The cost of doing the business is cheaper. I guess that's another thing to consider. I didn't really bring up, but when you go out to hire someone, you need to have a clear brief. So when I say you need to be prepared about what it is you expect, you need to sort of agree that with them. Typically, if they're new, I like to do that over the phone, or which is old school, but I think you can get a lot more done that way. And then we confirm in writing. Sometimes it depends on the person and the amount of money. We would do an actual contract. Sometimes it's just an email, but it's very clear about what the deliverables are, what the deadlines are, what the expectation is in terms of reporting statistics. So when you're done the program, they'll send you impressions, reach, engagement, etc. Sometimes screen grabs of things or links to see, so you can evaluate what was the cost and return on that campaign. So I think,
Cool question first, if you don't mind. So Asha's, they can hear me. Okay. Yeah, they can hear me. Asha's asking, where do you find influencers? How do you contact the individual you want to work with?
So I think you need to engage on the platforms that you think you want to work with people on, because you need to have an understanding of how those work. So somebody on your team is going to have to spend some time and play in there, right? And what you might like to do, if you don't want to, if you're really uncomfortable at the beginning, is you can create a sort of mock account, not your brand. If it's something new for you, honestly, when I first started getting involved with social media, like when it started, I felt really uncomfortable. So I just created like a personal account that nobody would know it was my company. And we just tested stuff there and like creep people, because you don't want to necessarily test things on your brand, right? You don't want to sort of like things and comment on things on behalf of your brand if maybe you're not sure you have the authority to do that. So if you just want to understand Instagram or understand TikTok, you need to spend time there, I think. Someone has to. And you'll see by being a part of that community what kinds of things are resonating, what sort of, who's engaging with who has a feeling of an authentic community. Right? Who do you think is doing good work? And again, with the cost, when I was saying what's their skill set, what's their community size, what's their engagement like, you might also want to consider the quality of the work. I didn't actually say that. That's a really obvious one. Some people will take a picture with their phone that literally took 2 seconds, and it might be very nice and bright and clean, but I would suggest that probably shouldn't be paid as much as somebody else who spent a day styling something. Right? It depends, again, what do you need for your campaign? But the quality of the work, is it where it needs to be at? So when you spend time in the community, you can start engaging with them in a really great way. And what I do, honestly, is I have an account called The Yummy Farm, and I have a personal one, which is like my personal one. And then I have The Yummy Farm, which I started so we could test concepts. Like when Reels came in, they were new for everybody, right? Well, am I going to do a reel on my client's account? I've never done one before. No, right? So we have things where we test things separately and see how they go and maybe make a few mistakes, and then we would bring them in for clients. But when you are doing things on these other accounts, you can connect with people through DMs or comments and create relationships. And there's a lot of people who spend time on social and they've made really good, authentic friendships. One of my actual best friends right now is somebody I met through Instagram, and we work together a lot. And she's a great person and a great friend, right? So if you want to follow her, her name is Betty from Stems and Forks, and her work is beautiful. And actually, if you pull out your phone and look at her work, you can see the type of work I'm saying, where something takes hours and hours and something that takes a few minutes. You can see very clearly hers takes hours and hours. So yeah, you create relationships online just authentically, and then you can send them a DM. That's what I was saying earlier at the beginning. The gates are gone. Anyone can reach out to anyone now. But when you do it, I think on behalf of a brand, you do need to still be professional. And so I often prefer to say, hi, so-and-so, I'm Nicole from Marin Marcoux. We work in food marketing. We really like what you're doing. You maybe have noticed I've been commenting on your stuff for the past few months. And I'd love it if we could have a chat about an opportunity. Could you either send me your direct email, or you can go to their website if they have one and get their direct email, right? But sometimes a DM is a really nice way. A lot of people don't even check emails these days, I find. So a DM is pretty immediate and you can get a reply pretty quickly. And usually I take it then off Instagram and do like an email or phone call. Any other questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I thought it was very insightful. So you said you're doing like a deep dive into, who their followers are, what the demographics are, their engagement. How do you find that information out?
A lot of the time you have to ask. So a lot of people have media kits. Some people don't, but you can still ask for, so on Instagram, I mean, there's some things you can do yourself. You can, if you look on Instagram on your phone, it doesn't show you the number of likes necessarily, but if you look on your computer, you can still see it. So you can just go look and see sort of what how many comments and little hearts do they have, right? You can see how big their community is. But for things like reach on stories, you'd have to ask. And I think that's where it's a more professional discussion, right? This is the program that we're interested in hiring you for. I don't tend to give away everything right at the start because why would I, right? But I'd say we're working on behalf of this client. We think it might be a fit. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself? And sometimes they share information and it's not a fit, right? And then I respectfully just decline. I say, you know, I don't think on this one it's a fit, but thank you very much. Maybe I'll keep that information in mind and there might be another opportunity in the future. And sometimes there is.
Have you ever worked with an influencer for a campaign where rather than a flat fee for the project, it's a fee based on number of referrals? So they might get paid. Like basically the sky could be the limit, but it's just dependent on the number
How
of
many
referrals.
links or conversions?
Yeah, direct conversions.
I've done that for research only. So I haven't done affiliate programs for sales, to be honest. Like I've organized them, but the only one where we've actually paid out was for like clicks to like research links. So we wanted information more than sales, but it's still a pay per click. Most people, I would say, don't work that way that I've worked with. Most people want to get paid. But I think it depends what the offer is, right? Almost everything's negotiable. As I mean, honestly, too, the days of we'll give you some free product and will you post for free that's gone, long gone. And I would say most influencers would suggest that's disrespectful to even suggest it. So that's a bad place to start. And even the days where you would have a beautiful event that costs you thousands of dollars. It used to be the occasion that you could invite someone or a number of people to an event and they would come and post for free because they were experiencing this event, right? I typically now people want to get paid for those as well as the experience of the event. I would say the only ones who would do it for free is if the value of the event is very, very high. So like a free holiday to Costa Rica, maybe then they will post for free. But if you're inviting them to a day out where you're doing, you know, something that actually costs a lot of money to put on, even then they might story for free if you're lucky. But you have to, again, don't assume anything. I think you have to really set out very clearly what the expectation is, sort of what it's a negotiation, right? So it's any relationship is like that. What are you giving them and what do you expect back? And that's where you can keep things from being disappointing and make sure that your campaigns run smoothly when you're very clear about the deliverable and what your expectation is and what your fee is and how you're going to pay them and also how promptly you're going to pay them. People like to work with us because we pay very, very quickly, usually within 48 hours by e-transfer. There are a lot of agencies who can take up to 90 days to pay, right? So those agencies, I mean, I hear about them all the time. People want to charge them more because they take longer to pay. And sometimes those people have to chase payment, right? So, you know, it's sort of how easy is a relationship? How clear are you with your brief? If you're really clear about what you want, you know, sometimes it's not just words. Maybe you'll put in examples. So like for somebody who's new, in a brief, I might say, okay, we would like you to create a recipe using this ingredient as the star. And sometimes the way I say it is, it's like Beyonce and her group. We want it to be Beyonce. There can be some other products, but no other produce. And our ingredient has to be the star. So you can have other things on the plate for sure. But we want to be the focus. And I would say, ideally I'd take pictures from their feed and say, these are the examples we really like for these reasons, 1, 2, 3. These things on your feed, maybe 2 or 3 examples, these wouldn't really be our preference, please. Right? So you can make it really clear about what is it you'd like and what is it you want and what is it you need. And then I find that things go very, very smoothly, right? It's just about being clear in your expectation. Yes.
So I have an online question here from Robert. He says, in agri-food, marketers and comms deal with complex difficult and contentious topics. Your recipe example sounded pretty minor. What is your criteria for how and when to react to negative attentions?
So, I mean, having worked in agriculture for a long time, I understand that. So like things like migrant workers, different sustainability claims. For me, I would say you're only talking about things that are true and that you can actually back up. So never lie, don't mislead people because you're only opening the door to problems. And if you need to provide really, really clear information. So say, for example, something like there is something about migrant workers on your farm, for example, right? You should have a list of like approved answers for things and proof points. So when we talk about branding and key pillars, you would say if a key pillar is about sustainability, you have proof to back that up. You can't just say I'm sustainable. Well, why are you sustainable? Right? Well, because we have invested in this technology. We do, we clean our water like this. We recycle it using like a filter instead of chemicals, whatever, right? You have your proof points. So if you're going to go on to a campaign, before you start the campaign, you should be able to actually anticipate what some of those problems might be and have your answers ready to go. When problems come up, you have to deal with it, I think, very, very quickly, because that's when it can spiral out of control. But if you have proof points, you're never going to please everybody all the time. So I've worked on sometimes things with farms and they're not organic, they grow conventionally. And you get haters. This isn't organic, it's not sustainable. And I would answer openly. I wouldn't hide the comment. I would answer openly and keep the comment. You're right. We grow conventionally. Our farm is not organic, but these are the commitments to sustainability that we've made. If you want more information, please visit our website. And to be honest, that usually shuts them down. If they keep going and going, then maybe you block them or hide the comment. But typically on leave comments, again, it's about being authentic and transparent. So you answer it professionally. You have your answers already ready. I mean, you probably, if you're in the business, you know what the hotspots are going to be, right? So know what your answers are going to be and be prepared. So you're not caught off, you're not scrambling. I'd say never be defensive or angry or hostile. You might say, well, thank you very much for asking. We're proud of the work that we're doing. And if organic is the choice for you, obviously they're free to shop somewhere else, right? So I think sort of leave it open and be professional in your response. And then if it continues to troll and it's something that's really out of control, you can always block them. But you have to decide that if you're working with an influencer, if that's something on your platform or with an influencer, right? You have to agree. I'm not going to tell an influencer that I'm partnering with and it's their platform and their livelihood, what they have to do. But if it's something really bad, I mean, because we've had that relationship already where we've negotiated, we understand what we're trying to achieve together. Normally, I've never come up with somebody who, was like, I'm not going to say that, because typically what we're suggesting is probably the right thing to say. I did have one person, actually it happened twice, where we hired somebody to go on TV and they actually didn't do what we wanted. And sometimes with live TV, it can be hard. That's a skill set, Michelle, for sure. Live is hard. And sometimes it can go a little bit sideways. You only have 3 minutes to do what you want to do, right? So again, you have your set deliverables you've already agreed. And if they're not delivered, then you have to agree together, what are we going to do about it? If they're professional about it, they'll work to make it right with you. If they're not professional about it, then really you don't have to pay them. If they didn't deliver what you agreed to pay them for, then, but you're not going to work with them again. That's for sure, right? So, anyway, I know I'm over time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.